Welcome to Mary's Eclectic Interests. Today's show will be comfort food again. Yes, we're going to do more comfort food, and it will be cranberry nut bread and pumpkin bread. In this particular recipe, which is the cranberry nut bread, in the front row there is 1 egg, 1 teaspoon salt, 1½ teaspoon of soda, and 1½ teaspoon of baking powder. Next to that is 1/4 cup of Crisco. In the middle, there's 2 cups of flour, 1 cup of sugar, and there is 1/2 cup of nuts. In the back, there is 1½ cups of cranberries and 3/4 cups of orange juice. Now I'm going to clear this all off, and what I'm going to do is get my bowl out. But basically I need to get this out of my way. With cranberry bread, it's like any bread. You just throw it all in. So there are certain instructions. For example, the cranberries. If they were fresh cranberries, it says to cut them in half. If they are frozen cranberries, they mention to put them in a food processor or in some sort of chopper. Now these, for your information, were frozen cranberries. And I did not read that instruction on there because I've never made this particular recipe with frozen cranberries. So I took and I sliced them in half while they were still frozen. And I discovered, wow, these are easy to cut when they're frozen. And then of course by the time I'm getting to do this recipe, they are defrosted. So I'm not going to worry too much about this. I have cut them in half. The other little instruction, of course, we have our egg. And let's get this over here. There we go. And oops, get rid of my eggshell. And they always want you to beat your eggs. I've already preheated my oven at 350 degrees. It says this is going to make 1 loaf, but I'm not going to do 1 loaf. I'm going to do 8 mini loaves. So here we go. It says mix 3/4 cups of orange juice. Here's my 3/4 cups of orange juice. This is not freshly squeezed orange juice. This is orange juice in a can, in the frozen food section. So here we go. Then it wants you to take your egg, and I'm going to actually blend this in a little bit into the orange juice. Now if I would have been smart, I would have brought over all my utensils in the first place. So I've kind of gotten that together. So it just basically says add everything together. So here we go. I'm just gonna do little, I think I'm gonna do the sugar next and see if that'll blend in. And I wanna make sure that the salt and the baking sodas and the baking powder go all together here. So I wanna make sure that those get whisked in really good. They don't tell me to do this, but I like doing this a little bit better. Either that, or I would prefer probably sifting them all together. Look at, already it's starting to become kind of a batter looking. Here. Now we're putting in some flour. Now I want to get this all in here. This one here, I'll be mixing with a spatula. Well, I don't think so. I think I'm going to go still with the whisk, because I think that gets it in a little bit better, and then I'll switch over to the spatula. Yeah, that's about as far as I'm going to go on this. I want to get all of that sugar that's settled on the bottom and all the flour. Now, this is rather a big bowl, but I do like to use bowls that are clear so you can see what's going on. And it's not a whole lot of batter, but it will make one. And it says add the nuts. Now here's the nuts. I am using, again, this is 1/2 cups, and this is these are walnuts. I had to look it up, walnuts, because I also have pecans sitting here. But these were already, these had already been put through a food processor. Instead of doing my nuts every time that I cook, I have a tendency to buy a bag of them. Oh, look, I have a whole one that didn't make it through. I can eat that one. And then that way I don't have to do it every time I decide to bake. They're already broken up. Now, these were frozen, so I'll probably end up with, just like blueberries, I said put them in frozen. Just add extra time. Don't defrost them. Well, this is what happens when you defrost something. The red dye, or the dye that's in your berries, it's into the batter. Now this isn't too bad because cranberries aren't real juicy. I could smell the orange juice that's in here. Okay, here we go. Now what I'm going to be doing, and here's how I'll go like this so you can see it. As I mentioned, I am going to be using these little mini loaf pans. It says to bake it 1.5 hours if you make it into one large. Oh, I forgot something. Shame on me. It's sitting over here and I totally forgot. I'm glad I glanced over. And this happens. This was set aside. I forgot all about it. It's the Crisco. I have to get that in there. If I don't get that in there, we're doomed. So let's get this in here. Now hopefully this is at room temperature and will blend in quite well. We'll find out. Yeah, it is. It's going in pretty good. I probably should not be using a whisk. All right, let's go back to the other thing. You'll see me do that all the time, starting things out with one thing, discovering it doesn't really work, and pushing something else in. But I have to get all that Crisco in. I should have put that in with the liquids. Then I could have made sure that it was evenly distributed. And that's what I like to do, is do that type of thing in the beginning, because you're never sure putting in later. And you can see these big white globs in there of the Crisco. Now the original recipe asked for spry, and I had no idea what spry was. This is actually somebody else's recipe, but I made it years ago. Spry was a different company that made a product similar to Crisco. And so here's Crisco. And what happened was Spry and Crisco, from what I read on the internet, were competing against each other. Spry lost and Crisco won, basically. So I thought, oh, I have to go to the store and look for Spry. But then I realized, oh, it's the same thing as Crisco. Here we go. Nowadays, too, we have other things that are so much nicer than before. We have things like spray oil and flour in a can. So you don't have to do all that by hand anymore. You just spray it. I think I've got it. I hope I do. I don't see any more white in there. At least I hope I don't see any more white. There we go. Okay, now I'm going to set this over. I'm going to get rid of some of these bowls. And now what I'm going to do is spray this. This happens to be Pam, but you can use whatever you want. Wow. Look at this. Okay. Whew. Last time I did this, I started choking on the spray back because it does get in the air. So let's see. This is, you know, it never takes very long to do different breads. The problem is the prep work. For example, I didn't force you to watch me cut all those wonderful cranberries. I find that very boring. All you need to know is, yes, you have to cut them in half. And well, what else can I do on a Sunday afternoon when there's absolutely nothing on television? I have been exercising more because I have been eating more comfort food. I usually don't have this stuff in my house. But what the heck. Now I don't know how this is going to make 8 of these. I might have to take one out and divide it amongst the others. Or just get smaller loaves, which is alright with me anyway, being I'm the one who has to eat the darn things. Let's see if I can knock it down. All right, you're going to hear some clunking. I want those to go down. I want them to get so I can see how high up they are. Maybe I kind of flatten them a little bit with these. Because I want them somewhat the same size. There's no topping on this. I'm not going to be putting any nut topping or... This one's a little high. I'm going to take some of that out. And this one's a little low too. Yep, there's still quite a bit of batter in that bowl, so let's get it in here. I don't want to waste any of this. There, I'll put that one in there. Well, I think that's as good as it's going to get. As I said, if it was in one big loaf, it says to bake it for an hour and a half. This definitely is not going to be in the oven for an hour and a half. I will set a timer for about half an hour maybe, and I'll check it. So I think I'm going to put 20 minutes. And then in 20 minutes I'll check it. I'll put a toothpick in the middle. If it comes out without any batter or anything on it, then I'll consider it done. But I'll let you know at the end of the show how long I ended up putting these 8 in. After 25 minutes, I removed my mini loaves from the oven. And again, they were placed at 350 degrees. I did overcook them a little bit. I actually put it on for 20 minutes. They weren't done, so I added another 10. But then I just decided to check them after 5 minutes. And this is what they look like. And I go, oops. So here are my little mini rolls. I will be taking these, wrapping them in freezer paper and putting them in my freezer. Here's one of the little mini loaves cut up. I've already eaten a little piece, and you can see the cranberries in them. And as again, I put them in a little bit too long, so the crust was a little crunchy, which I actually kind of like. So when I did cut it, you can see in the back where it flaked off. But that's all right. And it's not overly dry. It's a little on the dry side. I would suggest you watch them a little closer than I did. I really didn't think they would be done in 25 minutes. Welcome back to Mary's Eclectic Interests. I'll be making pumpkin bread. I haven't made this in several years, but here we go. In the front, there is 1/4 teaspoon of baking powder, 1 teaspoon of baking soda, 3/4 teaspoon of salt, 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon, 1/2 teaspoon of nutmeg, and 1/2 teaspoon of cloves. And that's all in that one little round white dish on the left, on that one side. In the middle, of course, we have 1 cup of pumpkin. And this is not seasoned. There's no seasoning. 2 eggs. In the back, there is 1.5 cups of sugar, and I'm using raw sugar as usual. 1/2 cup of salad oil, 1/2 cup of water, and finally 1 2/3 cups of flour. All I'm going to do is mix all of those together. Doesn't that sound like fun? I'm going to take all of this over here. We're going to get our bowl. I'm hoping this is a big enough bowl. I'm not quite sure what to start with. I think I'm going to start with dry ingredients. And here we go. I'm going to get this out of here so we have plenty of room and bring this forward a little bit. So that, is it being seen here? Yeah. And so there's the sugar. Here's the flour. Baking powder, baking soda, salt, our 3 spices, and what I'm going to do is, instead of, I suppose I could put those through a sifter, but I'm just going to use this whisk and get that all done in here. Use. First, I'm going to start with this lovely wooden spoon. And of course, I have the 2 eggs. And what I had better do is crack these eggs. Let's see, I'll pull. Here, we'll just do this and I'll bring it back. Because we surely don't want these. Whoops. Hopefully, there's no eggshells in there. Yes, there is one. Okay, got it. And here's the next one. Right. And so here's our eggs, and I'm just going to whisk them, not whisk them, but use a little fork, blend those. Set this aside. I'll bring my big bowl back in. And I'm debating on, I think I'm going to put the water in and the oil in. And let's get those mixed in a little bit. This is going quite nice. And now I'll put the eggs. All right, I'm mixing this up, and the directions say I can either make 1 large loaf or 3 small loaves. If it's 1 large loaf, it would be 1 hour in the oven at 325 degrees. Now we're going to get the pumpkin in here. Now with this, I'm only using 1 cup of pumpkin. So I have no idea what I'm going to do with the rest of the pumpkin. There's probably 3/4 of a cup of pumpkin left from that can. And this one, as I said, it doesn't matter what brand of pumpkin you use, as long as it does not have spices in it, because you're adding spices to this. Well, it smells good. I'm not going to guarantee what it's going to be like afterwards. Sometimes I like to experiment with things. I do have this in my not my cookbook, but in my recipe book, but I know I have not made this for a long time. All right, that is nicely mixed together. What I'm going to try to do is I'm not going to make 1 loaf. I'm not going to make 3 loaves. I'm going to try and make this. There are 8 loaves, small loaves. I think I have too much for these, but I'm going to see how they fill up. And so I am going to spray these. I only have, okay, this is a Pam spray, but this one has flour in it. Usually they'll just say use an oil or something like that. I cheat. I like to get things in spray cans. If there's any left in here, this is probably, there we go. Now, if it doesn't work out, I'll let you know. I figured I could use this one up, and then I have 1 more. In case, boy, that gets in your lungs. I was thinking of doing parchment paper, but it was just such a tiny little rectangle, it was hard to put it in there. All right, let's see how this is going to work. If I were smart, I would put some chocolate chips in this mixture. I think that would be really good. And I'm not quite sure how full. I'm just going to try and get them all somewhat full and then use whatever's left to top them off. And the reason I want these so small is I don't have family I'm sharing this with. And I sure don't want one great big. Oops, I noticed that some of the flour didn't get mixed in. I guess I should have used a spatula to get down to the bottom here. There, resolve that issue. So I didn't want to have one big large loaf. And I could freeze it, yes. Cut it up and freeze it in sections. But I thought this might be a little nicer. Maybe if this turns out, I might bring over some for one of the neighbors. So that should be very interesting. All right, let's see if I can get this very last bit there in here. I would think they would have made this so that it's 1 loaf in here, but maybe not. Because they're about halfway filled. I'm not sure how high up they're going to go. I would have preferred to have them higher up, more than where they're at now. Oops, I got some that's kind of sloppy. And some I have, oops, boy, I'm just slopping all over, aren't I? So this one I'm a little concerned over. Maybe I'll take a little bit of this one here, and oh, it's not going to let me do this. I suppose I should have a spoon there and throw a little bit more in here. There, because this one was a little high. All right, whack it down a few times. And here we go. I'm going to be putting this in the oven. And I will be baking those until I can put a toothpick in and come out clean.